Alright, so today I am going to be doing a factoring review. This is Mrs. Kenman. I am looking at the worksheet, How Do Fishermen Save Gas? And I'm going to be working out the highlighted problems. And in this video, I am going to be using splitting the middle term or grouping, whichever one your teacher called it. So, if you like the box method, I made a separate video for that, so you want to watch that one. Okay, so I'm not doing them both in both methods. If you're in my class, I always did it both methods, but for the sake of shorter videos, I'm doing one video with box and one video for splitting the middle term, so you can pick which way you like and only watch that video. Alright, number one. The thing about number one is it has no middle term. When it has no middle term, I think it might be the difference of two squares, which is a minus b, a plus b. So we're going to look and see if it turns out to be that way for this one, and then why. When I'm doing splitting the middle term, I always start it with my x, and I take my first number times my last number, which is negative 196. And there is no middle term in this one, so I know I need to add to get 0. If nothing's there, you know it's plus 0n. Which, when I'm adding to get 0, I need the same number once positive and once negative. So it turns out that the square root of 196 is 14. So I have positive 14 and negative 14. So when I split the middle term, I write the first number, and then I use my two numbers I came up with. And instead of writing 0n, I'm going to write 14n minus 14n. And then minus 49. So when I am splitting the middle term, I then start doing grouping. So I look at the first two terms, and they both have a 2n in it. So when I factor out a 2n, when I divide that out, I get 2n plus 7. And then out of my last two terms, 7 goes into both of those. But if my third term is ever negative, I must take out a negative, or it's not going to work out for me. So I put negative 7, and then I'm left with 2n plus 7. So then I look at, well, what's in my parentheses should be the same. If it's not the same, I messed up. Most of the time I messed up by not taking out the right thing out of the second two, or at least that's where I mess up most. So I get 2n plus 7, they have the same. And then I look at, well, what were their coefficients? And that makes up the second parentheses. Or I say, what do they have different? 2n minus 7. So that's my factored pair. So on my worksheet, 2n plus 7 is 9, and 2n minus 7 is g. So that means that in my puzzle at the bottom, in box 9, I put g. So I talked about at the beginning how it could be the difference of two squares. Well, 4 is 2 times 2, and n is n times n. So really, 4n squared could be written as 2n quantity squared. 49 is 7, so 7 squared. So that is 2n minus 7 and 2n plus 7. So if you ever see it's two terms and each term is a perfect square, you're welcome to go straight to the difference of two squares. Our next one we're going to do together is number 3. Alright, in number 3, there's no number here, so it's a 1. So I have to multiply 1 times 20, and then I'm adding to get negative 9, which would be negative 4 and negative 5. A negative times a negative is a positive, and a negative minus a negative is negative. So I write n squared minus 4n minus 5n plus 20. Oops, I meant to do that in blue. The 20 came from the original, and the n squared came from the original. The negative 4n and the negative 5n came from the x. So I still group it together. The first two I can take out an n, and the last two I can take out a negative 5. So in the first two, if I take out an n, I'm going to be left with n minus 4. And then in the last two, if I take out a negative 5, I'm going to be left with n minus 4. So both of them have n minus 4, and then their coefficients make n minus 5. So n minus 4 is 14, and n minus 5 is p. In this problem, I had negative 4 and 5, and if you notice my answer, I have negative 4 and negative 5. They're the same numbers. If your leading coefficient is 1, your two numbers and your x are always going to be your two factors here. So if you recognize that, feel free to skip through the process and go straight to the answer, because that's what the answer is always going to be. If you really like keeping the same steps every time, then continue doing the steps. All right, the next one I'm going to do for you is number 6. Number 6 is 3n squared minus 8n plus 5. So I multiply 3 times 5 and I get 15, and I'm going to add to get negative 8. So I have 1 and 15 and 3 and 5. Because I'm multiplying to get a positive, my signs need to be the same, and I'm adding to get a negative, and they both need to be negative. Turns out negative 3 and negative 5 are my two numbers. Oops, doing my colors wrong again. So I got negative 3n squared minus 3n minus 5n, and then plus 5. So these two came from here, and these two came from over here. So I divide by 3n on both of those. So I'm left with 3n and n minus, if everything cancels out, we have to put something there, so we put a 1. And then in these, remember up in the first one, I talked about if your third number is negative, you have to take out the negative. So I need to divide everything by negative 5, which is n, and then positive 5 divided by negative 1 is negative 1. So they both have n minus 1, and then I haven't used 3n minus 5. So n minus 1 is 18, 3n minus 5 is s. Alright, next one we're going to do together is number 7. Number 7 is a squared plus 4a minus 21. So I'm multiplying to get negative 21 and adding to get 4. So 1 times 21, 3 times 7. And I'm going to multiply to get a negative, but add to get a positive. So I need my smaller number to be negative this time, and I get negative 3 and 7. If I do have a positive and a negative number, sometimes I like writing the negative number first as far as the middle two, because then I won't have to worry about remembering to factor out that negative, but maybe I don't remember that. So I'm going to divide both these by a. I get a times a minus 3, and then the last two I'm going to divide by 7. And I get a minus 3 again. So they both have a minus 3, and then they don't have a plus 7. So, in that problem, number 3, we notice that these two factors end up being the two things at the end of my problem. So, if you saw that, you could have jumped ahead of me on this example. A minus 3 is p, and a plus 7 is 13 for the puzzle. Number 12. Ten times negative 1 is negative 10, and adding to get negative 3. So things that multiply to get 10 are 1 and 10, and 2 and 5. If I'm multiplying to get a negative and adding to get a negative, the bigger number needs to be negative. So I've got 2 and negative 5. So in the last problem I said that when the negative and positive, I like to put a negative first, but in this problem I'm going to put the negative second just to show you it works out the same way. So I've got 10a squared plus 2a minus 5a and then minus 1. So 2a goes into the first 2, leaving me with 5a plus 1. And then 5 and 1 don't have anything in common, so I have to divide it by something, so I put a 1 there. But also, I need to put a negative because my third number is negative. So then I end up with 5a plus 1, which is a match, so that's what I needed. So I got 5a plus 1. And then my second parentheses is 2a minus 1. So 5a plus 1 is 15, and 2a minus 1 is r. Alright, the next one I'm going to do with you today is 13. 13 is 8u squared plus 19u plus 6. So 8 times 6 is 48, and we're adding to get 19. 48 has a lot of factors. 1 and 48, oops, I wrote 42. 2 and 24, 3 and 16, 4 and 12, 6 and 8. Now multiplying to get a positive and adding to get a positive, so they both need to be positive, which is nice. I don't have to work with the signs. I can just deal with the numbers. So 3 plus 16 is 19. So I've got my numbers figured out. So 8u squared. I think in this one I'm actually going to switch the 16 and the 3 because 16 and 8 have common factors and 6 and 3 have common factors. So I'm going to put the 16 first and the 3 last. You have the ability to switch things around if you think they're going to be easier the other way. So this way, they are both divisible by 8u. So 8u, leaving me with u plus 2. And then 3, leaving me with u plus 2. So my common factors are u plus 2 and 8u plus 3. So u plus 2 is 15 and 8u plus 3 is O. You should not be matching a letter with another letter. So if that's the case, something went wrong in your problem. The last one I'm going to do with you, hopefully I can squeeze it on here, is 15. 3u squared minus 11u minus 14. So 3 times 14 is negative 42. And I'm adding to get negative 11. Just like 48, 42 has a lot of factors. 1 and 42, 2 and 21, 3 and 14, 6 and 7. So if I'm multiplying to get a negative and adding to get a negative, I want the small number to be positive and the large number to be negative. So that ends up being 3 and negative 14. So I've got 3u squared plus 3u, plus 3u minus 14u minus 14. I keep messing up my colors. I'm trying to keep going. Alright, so I'm going to divide the first by 3u. So 3's cancel out, leaving me with u. Remember, when it's identical, you have to put something there, so I'll put plus 1. And then I divide by negative 14. And I get u. Again, it's the same thing as plus 1. Good thing they turned out to be the same. So I have u plus 1 3u minus 14. So u plus 1 is m, and 3u minus 14 is 6. So that is factoring by splitting the middle term. Thanks for joining me today.